So, welcome to the first in a series of short video interviews in partnership with the GC Index, where I explore with HR leaders who have taken the GC Index the impact they are having with their organizations as I ask what's next post COVID-19. So, joining me today is Andrea Bortner, who is the Chief Human Resources Officer at the Grocery Outlet. So, good afternoon, Andrea, and thank you for joining me from California, which is morning for you, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you.
Okay, Andrea, I think what would be useful to start, if you give us a little overview of your role with the Grocery Outlet, your sort of responsibilities, so we can get to know a little bit more about you.
Sure. So this is kind of one of the first time CHRO positions at the company. It's a company that's been a family-owned business, was privately held, and went public last June. So as we look to grow and scale the business, there are new roles being brought in, and this is one of those roles. So I've been with the organization just a little over 3 months, and all of that in shelter in place. It's been
Wow,
fun.
so straight into a role, and then we have COVID-19 hit. Wow.
Yes, yes, absolutely. It's been an incredible learning experience.
All right, Andrea. So let's kick off with our sort of first COVID-19 question, coming through the crisis and preparing for a better future question. So let's start with, so given your GC Index proclivities, so how have you been, do you feel, at your best as an HR leader, and what do you feel has challenged you the most?
So initially, as all of this was unfolding, again, new role, new company, also adult children coming home because of the crisis. They're college students that ended up home. So everything was tossed in the air. And what I tend to try to do is try to make sense of everything and get it organized and structured so that we can act. And so based on kind of my strategist implementer, I kept trying to do that. And at my best, I can take a lot of information in and then look at it holistically. So as I was learning the business, I was in the crisis, but I was also able to pull up because I was trying to, again, make sense and order of everything and see how it connected. And that was, I think, helpful for myself, but also for the CEO, because we could just get lost in the crisis. I also was thinking about next year, not just this year. As I watched our business accelerate in growth, and we've had 16 years of consecutive growth. So this is a company that has long tenure and people used to winning. I kept thinking about, in retail, you think about comp store sales. Next year, are we going to be able to comp 20% growth, 30% growth? Most likely not. So how are our leaders going to be prepared for that? What can we do right now to get them ready for something that's very different on the back end of this? So those I think are at the best. What challenged me was the fluidity of everything. Every time I thought I had a solution, the circumstances changed, or new information came in, or a new set of crises. And you're dealing with things that are fairly frightening, someone's health. And so it's we have a business that we have employees that are essential workers on the front line. We have employees in our warehouses that are, working every day to collectively together. And then we have a whole set of population that's working from home. So everything started to change. And so you have to look at some of the details and then also, that holistic view. So it was hard to keep up. And I had to really pay attention to how I was taking care of myself and others, and knowing that we weren't going to have all the answers. We were going to do the best we could and be as transparent with our employees and our investors. We're doing the best we can with the ground shaking underneath. So.
Yeah, I think, and this whole kind of strategist piece is this, wanting of data, knowledge, and what's happened before to measure against it. So you can, of course, you didn't have that.
No. And again, I think I've worked in a lot of different industries, and my philosophy is people are people are people, as long as you understand the business model. But coming in, my first day was the first day of shelter in place here in California. So trying to learn the business via Zoom and and all of the people and in a crisis. So it's it puts a lot of strain on someone who likes a little bit more structure, order, putting the pieces together. So.
Okay, terrific. All right, so let's move on to question two then. So that shapes something up quite nicely. So question two is, what are your present key concerns and challenges for your employees and organizations sort of right now?
Mm-hmm. So first and foremost, and this is something that I appreciate, is safety. We are completely concerned about safety and protection. That is our biggest concern. And in addition to that, it's fatigue. How do we have enough resources so that we don't have people burn out? And that fatigue is not just for those on the front lines, it's also work from home. And what we're hearing is there is no distinction in work time anymore. It literally is bleeds into the evenings and the weekends. There's just no separation. So people are exhausted and they're doing the best they can because we're also in a incredible growth time right now. So it's a very odd situation to be in. I think the other thing is we had the COVID crisis, and then we had the complexity of a real social injustice, racism crisis. And so a lot of what we're trying to do is listen. We are not going to be able to fix everything right away. But leaders in our company are used to executing. So you get a problem, you go fix it. This is different. We can't fix everything right now. So listening, 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 and giving space for people to take a break, and then allowing this kind of resilience and adaptability to continue to unfold. Um, Change has been tested like you would not believe. And of course, with crisis, people just jump to change. But the length of time of this is really wearing on people. And they're talking about they want just normal. I don't think it's going to be normal. So what does that, how do they center? So those are our concerns. I mean, clearly we have incredible growth, and our operators are, doing an amazing job with their stores. So keeping up with that and keeping enough, we're trying to hire enough people. That's the other crazy thing. There's some people who need to let people go, and we are trying to hire. So there's just a lot happening at one time.
And I think that's the interesting part, isn't it? Some companies I've spoken to, certainly in the UK, for example, are furloughed, and they've got the opposite
Yes.
problem, as you said. Had to work through this because the demand has been, huge, and then you've got to recruit, so it's a whole different set of, sort of challenges that you have.
Yes.
Okay. All right, so let's move on to the next one, which really is around how are you preparing for, so I would normally say reboarding. You're not reboarding because you've been continuing on. However, you've had to kind of look, as you rightly said just a minute ago, about those safety measures for keeping everyone safe. And I guess that's not just for your employees, but it's also your customers as well.
Yes. Yes. So again, we have had employees that have been showing up to an office location, to a store, to a warehouse consistently. So it's continuing to keep the discipline around the protective gear, the cleanliness, etc., distancing, all of that. And then we have a large corporate office in Emeryville, California, and then another smaller one back in Pennsylvania. Um, and we are right now interviewing and talking to our employees that are working from home and determining who is going to be able to start coming back in the office. What will that look like? How many can we have at one time? How do we set up the right structure in meeting rooms and distancing in the office? Because our office environment for everyone, including the CEO, has been cubicles. And we're just a big connected group of people. Well, now we have to figure out how do we set up protective barriers. Um, so we are taking a very measured, staged approach instead of a light switch. This is not like everybody's going to come back at one time. We also have the complexity of kind of working parents who have children who aren't going to school. And so it will be a struggle for them to actually come back to the office. So what we're trying to do is balance. Everybody's been delivering on their priorities, so that's fantastic. So maybe we have people work from home through the rest of the year, and then some people can come back in the office. So it's, again, fluid in nature. That is going to be one of the greatest learnings out of all of this. And then really working with our employees to figure out what's the best solution overall.
Do you, Andrea, do you, in terms of with your employees, you at that stage, I guess, of doing, I don't know how you do it, pulse surveys or asking, really understanding what they need for it? Because I guess, again, when you've got, in some of the things we're seeing are people anxious about coming back to, say, an office environment.
Right.
You've got a bit of both, haven't you? Because you've got those people who are working in stores, etc. At the moment. The office environment is completely the opposite.
Right. And so initially we took a pulse survey just in general across the organization for the corporate teams. And now we're literally launching this next week individual questions for people, specifically for each department, because we need to figure out how many people want to come back. When do they want to come back? Do they want to come back full time? Do they want to only come back 2 days a week? It's literally all the puzzle pieces trying to put it together. And again, we are going to be as supportive as we can be through this process. We are not going to demand that people, okay, you have to come back here or you have to do this or that. As long as people are delivering on what they're supposed to be doing for their job, we want to be flexible.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. And again, I guess you've got the kind of added problems of public transport as we do in
Exactly.
cities, haven't you? So, and again, that anxiety about traveling if they want to or not. So this open approach that you're taking seems to be very, very sensible. Yeah.
Hmm.
Okay, good. So let's move on to the next one then, really, which is, and let's go back to sort of the GC index sort of thinking here, because so given your proclivities as an HR leader, so for you, what are you exploring in terms of opportunity and the learning from this crisis? And I always look at, again, how is that influencing the destination of the organization itself? So how is that going to pan out for you as an HR leader, your HR function, and your employees?
So, based on, first of all, the strategy of the company and our desire to grow and scale, um, there's a lot that has to be done in regards to leadership and infrastructure. So, the company has been successful, but building stronger leaders, growing them or bringing them in, um, and now it's more important than ever because it's one thing to have a certain expertise in a function, but it's another thing to actually know how to lead, listen, communicate. And so building that capability, for me is kind of front and center versus something that was a little bit longer term, like, oh, down the road, we'll have the opportunity to do that. Um, I think also allowing people to celebrate the resilience that they've had and draw upon that for what is to come. Because again, it is pretty tiring. We can do a lot in a month or a month and a half of crisis, but when you're talking 6 months, 8 months, it's very draining. So what is it that we can draw upon? And I think those learnings, especially for our leaders, one of the things I appreciated coming in is when you're in crisis, your values are really tested. And our leaders have demonstrated incredible, true values on how they care for their employees and the community and our operators. And so it's the learning is okay, we actually should recognize and celebrate that and continue to replicate it. I think for me, it's also for myself and my team and the people that I support, this constant reminder of self-care. If you can't take care of yourself, you can't take care of others. And we are so consumed with the needs of others that we need to continue to figure out, that's a huge learning as you just can't push that aside. You need to be conscious about that every day. Um, for our HR team, I think, well, and actually for the whole company, we have blown through perceptions and beliefs of how we could be effective. So, for example, starting in March, we started interviewing for new hires all via Zoom. So we interview, we hire, and we onboard in a Zoom environment. And we're a smaller business, but we've hired over 40 people in that period of time in that manner. We would have never done that in the past. So it changes the whole construct of how you attract talent. I think the other piece that is really fascinating is this remote working. And we were pretty structured in the past on what our belief system was. You have to be in the office almost every day. Maybe you can have one day at home per week, but we have to track what you're doing. And now it's like, wow, we could probably hire people anywhere in the world because we're all figuring out how to do this remotely. So I think that's a huge learning that we need to continue to use. And and then I think finally for our employees overall, we're thrust into new situations. Comfort zones have been stretched and people survived. I'm not talking about the illness itself, but just all of the circumstances around it. And how do we continue to remember that? Because I can't see us going back to what was a normal. We are going forward to what we're creating. We're creating something new based on the skills and the situation that we've found ourselves in. That was a
Yeah.
lot.
That was good. No, that's good. And I think, like I said, you're quite an unusual one to talk to in terms of your business, because I think, because you've got that double-edged sword of
Yeah.
well-being is so important, obviously, but you've got it from a point of burnout, and then you've got it on the other point of office staff who can't work or are working remotely. So you've got this balance there. I think leadership, quite rightly, yeah, absolutely. We can see we need different leadership. There's a
Yeah.
whole new world that we're moving into, and this has accelerated it, hasn't it, to some degree?
Yeah, and you made me think of another point that I think is really important, and I've been trying to communicate with our leaders. Our leaders are not psychologists or psychiatrists. They're not therapists. And they are thrust into situations of people demonstrating their raw emotions in a different way than ever before. And so we have put in place mechanisms and support networks that pull some of that away from the leader and give it to people who are more professional. And that's online, over the phone, and in person if needed. That is so important because that blurs the line. I cannot help you if you think you're going to get a divorce because you have nowhere to go in your house and the two of you are, like killing each other. But there are resources that can. And so our leaders, as much as they want to help, do have to find a distinction between what can I solve for and what should I give other resources, get other resources for support.
And then, so finally, Andrea, I guess this is the one I quite like at the end, which is really you're there, HR leader in this unprecedented time, really a mad time as it might seem. 3 months into a role as well. So, I guess your personal view on being, you at the moment, how are you feeling in this challenging time? How are you coping?
Yeah, so when I reflect on that, it's exhilarating and it's frightening. I mean, that's really what's going on is um, there is so much in the human dynamic that is so fascinating to me, and watching people trust each other, lean in and support each other, the resilience that I see, and the frightening piece to me is there's real health concerns here. And so this isn't like I'm uncomfortable with something. This is like this could really impact people. And our entire way of interacting as a society has changed. How we greet each other, how we socially interact, how we grieve, how we celebrate. My family members, if there's a death or a birth, everything is just so sterile. And that's not our human nature. So watching that and being part of it as an HR leader, um, it's like it's just an opportunity to learn all over the place, and then just be in support of whatever you can for your family, for your communities, for your company. So I just take it one day at a time, really. That's what all you can do. And just be balanced, calm. The calmer you can be, I think, the better it is for everybody. And then just constantly talking about what's possible. Given these crazy circumstances, what's possible? What can we do? Not all of the limitations. So I just go back to it's exhilarating and frightening all at the same time.
And do you find, I mean, I guess, do you find it, some people have said this to me, a little bit lonely at the moment because you're in that kind of, you're in quite a critical, I think, quite a critical role in that HR space with responsible for all his employees, and you feel quite lonely or, detached from, I don't
Yeah,
mean detached, but
so
I mean challenged, in terms of your own
yeah.
personal.
You know, early on, as you grow in your career and the more you're in these CHRO positions, they can be lonely. But what I have found is building my own trusted network of other CHROs. So they're my sanity check. They're my trusted partners I can go to and say, could you believe this? Like you can't really do that with other people. So I think earlier in my stage as a CHRO, I was probably more lonely. Now I have a handful of people. This isn't a big network, but a handful of people where we reach out to each other for just being a sounding bored or laughing or whatever emotion to be there together. So yeah, I wouldn't say I feel as lonely now just because I set up an infrastructure to help that.
And I think that's the whole thing. I was looking at your implementers pretty high, and again, so I guess your energy levels bringing to the business must be really, really. They must be loving that at the moment. Must be a real help for the rest of the team.
Yeah, I think the other thing too, again, this is a company that was family owned, privately held, and now public. I'm bringing I would say, a lot more structure, a lot more frameworks. Let's think about it this way, like, front to back, think about it holistically. And we joke about it because it is a little bit different than what they're used to. But I think it helps us think about things and get ahead of concerns. A little bit better versus just living in the moment.
And I guess overall, finally, then, so do you see a better way, a better new? Do you see that coming out of this eventually?
Yeah, I do. I really do. And I think in struggle, there can always be growth. And it's how we take the difficulty and shape it into something that can be productive. And it's a conscious effort. And I talk a lot about um, in our own organization, how do we co-create solutions? One or two people should not develop solutions for large systemic issues. It's co-creating and then keeping it alive. So I think there's a lot we're learning just about how we work and how productive we can be. There is this added layer of how do we show up for each other? How do we address our biases? How do we make this a fair and equitable workplace? And I think that we've been on a very good journey as a company because it's a very value-based organization, but there's definitely room for improvement. And that is something we need to work on together. So I feel very hopeful. And I do for our company, for our communities, and for our country, and for the world. I mean, I think this is an opportunity to take the learnings and say, what do we want to never do again? And what are the things that we want to continue to nurture?
Exactly. I think what we're seeing this kind of this opportunity to reset, take all that learning on board, but
Yes.
don't just go back to the norm how it was. Let's make this
Mm-mm.
a better way. So, Andrea, that's terrific. I think that's really good. So, thanks for spending some time with me today,
Thank
and it's
you.
just insightful to hear. As I said, in that kind of industry you're in, your challenges and how you're coming through them, and
Mhm.
getting through it all. So just quickly, join me next time when I catch up another HR director, and we see how they're exploring the challenges ahead and navigating through this. So thank you very much. Thanks, Andrea. Bye.
Thank you. Wonderful. Wonderful to meet you.